The wedding was in a large hotel in Midtown East on a cool afternoon in June that felt more like March. Birds trilled throughout the ceremony as though they'd been hired. Wedges of light fell into the hall at dramatic, elegant angles. The officiant, Jordan's colleague Noguchi, didn't bring up the fact that Rosie and Jordan had met on Instagram, or that Rosie had been slightly drunk when she had first messaged Jordan, or that they'd been together only 9 months before getting engaged. Rosie had envisioned a small wedding, outside, a mountain or a lake in the backdrop. For the reception, she'd pictured a repurposed barn with live-edged tables, burlap runners, string lights, chalkboard menus, and mason jars. Maybe a jazz trio. But Jordan's parents were paying, and his mother was not interested in burlap, reclaimed wood, or jazz. She wore a dress she'd seen advertised on Instagram. The ad hadn't been for the wedding dress. It had been for invisible braces, but the invisible braces company's chatbot had given Rosie an answer when she'd asked. The model's dress was available from a budget bridal startup. It turned out to be so cheap that she doubted whether she actually wanted it. Jordan wore a gray suit that matched his eyes. When it came time to read their vows, he pulled a folded piece of paper from his breast pocket. Sweat sparkled along his hairline, and his voice shook as he read. He did not make fun of Rosie for her habits, like her tendency to waver for a long time before making a decision, only to abruptly change her mind at the last minute. Instead, he described how, when they first started dating, Rosie would stand on his feet while he waited for an Uber back to his apartment because she didn't want him to leave. "I promise not to go anywhere," he said. "You will never have to step on my feet again." The audience laughed at this, but Rosie knew he was being sincere. "You are the bravest person I know," he continued. "You asked me to teach you how to drive, and 1 week later you were in the front seat of my Tesla, merging onto the Jackie Robinson Parkway. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't terrified, but I was, and am, in awe of your determination." Rosie smiled sheepishly at the audience, which mostly comprised Jordan's family and colleagues. "I can't believe I get to wake up every day next to my best friend," he said. A tear ran quickly down his cheek, and he wiped it away with the back of his hand. "It is impossible to know how to end these vows, and so I vow not to." Rosie was relieved to see her mother seated off to the side, empty seats surrounding her, her misery contained. She was surprised her mother had shown up at all. Her mother claimed that social events gave her headaches. She'd only met Jordan once for brunch a few weeks before the wedding, despite living in the same city. Rosie had spent hours picking the restaurant, changing the reservation several times, trying to imagine her mother at each one. Her mother did not like to eat at restaurants and had something against brunch. When they sat down, she said the sun was in her eyes, and when they moved inside, she huddled under a sweater. While Jordan made small talk with her about his seasonal allergies, her plate of eggs sat untouched. Rosie could not focus on anything except her mother's predetermined displeasure, and was so relieved when brunch was over that she took a 2-hour coma-like nap afterward. Rosie's father had left Rosie's mother soon after Rosie was born, and her mother had entertained a series of short-lived relationships with men who had no desire to approximate a father for Rosie. "Jordan?" she said, turning to face him. She looked at the note card in her hands. Her scalp was hot under the lights.